Hey, everybody. Welcome to TCG Online Virtual Service. It wouldn't be TCG unless we were starting at 6:05 instead of 6 o'clock.
6:04?
6:04, we're early. There you go. So, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
How was your Thanksgiving? Tell me, give me a couple of words to sum up Thanksgiving.
Really good food.
Mm-hmm.
Surrounded by people I love.
Okay. How about you, Hal?
I feel like we had a crazy week of Thanksgiving. It was so sweet and special to spend our first Thanksgiving dinner all together as a church. It was just so nice last week on Sunday to see so many faces and hug so many people, and it was definitely a very sweet night. And then my husband and my kids and I went up and we brought Thanksgiving dinner to the family shelter on actual Thanksgiving. So it was just a very humbling space to continue to love on people on a holiday when so many other places are closed, yet needs are still so high and rampant, and just it was sweet and tender. And I feel like there was just a lot of opportunity to be grateful for the work that's being done and for progress, even when it feels really small.
Yeah. So let's lean into that for just a second, because Holly, you and I have talked some this week about kind of the magic of what's happening at Family Shelter, which is, the reason that we're back virtual is so that we can use our building for Family Shelter all this winter. But really kind of the beauty that's happening around the table every night at dinner and after kids go to bed and parents caregivers kind of migrate back out to the table, and just this connection place, this place of belonging, this place of community and connection. And the table is often used as an analogy for the church. It's used, especially in our tradition, in the disciples, as kind of the vernacular of the church and community and connection. I've always kind of pushed back on that a little bit, because I struggle a little bit with the idea that the table is a stationary object and hard to move. I like to think of the church a little bit more like a picnic personally, because I think there's a problem when we have a mindset of I set a place for you to come to. But yet, all that the same, there was a lot of important tables in Jesus's ministry. Jesus understood the beauty of the table. He understood the purpose of the table and the level playing field that could happen around the table. But also, Jesus didn't try to fit in at every table that he was invited to. He flipped some tables. He walked away from some tables. He set his own tables sometime. But talk just for a minute, would you, about some of what you're seeing happening around the table in that space?
I think it's been a weird week of a lot of contradicting spaces where it's been really beautiful to see things, because I am never, especially when we talk about the things that we do at TCG, we never try to ever present it as look at us, pat ourselves on the back because we're meeting this need and this solution, because the reality is the need goes so far beyond us. And this week has been a week of capacity for us as staff and for us as a shelter. We have 4 families staying with us and our space is full and it's overwhelmed. And the needs this week have been put us at capacity for some of the things where we've had to be really creative to help find some solutions during a week when so many businesses had business hours, things were closed, things are more expensive during the holidays, just a lot of those really hard spaces for us to try to navigate and feeling very exhausted in those moments. The thing that's been really beautiful has just, we have these 4 families that are staying with us right now, and you don't have to ask. There's just this inherent sense of wanting to take care of one another that is developed. And so just this morning, we had one family offer to give another family a ride to get them to where they needed to go. There's been, they're pouring each other's kids juice. They're, walking to the bathroom and trying to help find the PJs that went missing on the walk to go take a shower, and trying to, just those little special moments, oh, I ran out of my baby lotion, and another mom's don't worry, you can use some of mine. There's just those little moments where it's just it's not asked, it's not expected, but that's just so naturally that space. And I think that's been really humbling, sitting around Thanksgiving table with families where they wanted to know what each other were grateful for, and just that their friendships, the encouragement. I think the encouragement is my favorite. So many of them, just hearing little moments where we have one woman who said to another mom, was just like, you're a really good mom, and I just think you need to know that. And it just like melted me, because it was like, for two that are in such an impossible situation, the fact that they cared enough to extend that sense of encouragement is just really, really beautiful. And that's been really humbling, and just a takeaway that I've carried with me, that this isn't the work we're doing, it's the work collectively that's being done. And we couldn't do that without the generosity coming from those that are within our walls right now.
So I think one of the things that I feel really compelled to point out in this space is that tables can be one of two things, right? By nature. Tables can be exclusionary, and this is my table, this is my space. I get to control who's in this space and who sits in this space and who has the privilege of being in this place and enjoying conversations. I get to have power over what happens at and around this table. Tables can be incredibly exclusionary. I think we can all share experiences of exclusive tables that we have either sat at or not been allowed to sit at for a wide variety of reasons. I think when Jesus set a table, it was the opposite. It was an inclusive table. It was a table that said, we'll find more space. We'll pull up more chairs. Here, take my seat. Nobody's not qualified to sit at this table. I don't care who you are, what you've done, what your story has been, what baggage you carry. There's not judgment at this table. This table is a safe space. This table is a brave space. And I think that has really kind of formed who we are at TCG, is trying to love and set tables the way that Jesus set tables. And so as we kind of transition these next few weeks from just kind of the everyday into this really beautiful season that we call Advent in the church, kind of the more formal term for the Christmas season. This is the first week of Advent, and it is when we start to kind of explore that Christmas story and the nativity and all that is involved in that and the complexities of that story. We try hard to look at them at TCG grounded in context, grounded in history, not just sugar-coated. We try to look at all of the different layers with them. But I think it is so important that before we do anything else, Advent-related, Christmas-related, holiday-related, I think it's important that we just acknowledge and proclaim that Advent in general, Christmas in general, don't mind all my dogs in the background, is this incredibly beautiful whisper of welcome that says, this gift was for everybody, right? God sent Jesus down for everyone. There was nothing exclusionary about that act. That was the most radical, inclusive, loving act in human history. And so there is one of my absolute favorite songs of all time, most definitely one of my favorite Christmas songs that we came across a few years ago. And since the moment that I heard it, it has become a TCG Advent staple. And I asked if Holly and Alyssa would start us in this space, because there are no other lyrics that I feel like proclaim what we feel to be the love, the hope, the faith, the joy, the peace that is Advent, like this one. And so I just want to invite you into these next few moments just to listen to these lyrics, listen to these words, ponder them, meditate over them, let them convict you, let them challenge you, let them stir your spirit, maybe in a way that makes you feel included in a way you haven't felt included in something holy in a long time. Maybe it challenges you to think about how inclusive or exclusive you have been when it comes to tables and faith communities now and in the past. So will you lead us in this space and ring in Advent season for us?
are not alone. Oh, come, barren and waiting ones, weary of praying, come, see what your God has done. Christ is born. Christ is born. Christ is born for you. Oh, come, bitter and broken, come, with fears unspoken, come, taste of his perfect love. Oh, come, guilty and hiding ones, there is no need to run. See what your God has done. Christ is born. Christ is born. Christ is born for you. He's the Lamb who was given, slain for our pardon. His promise is peace for those who believe. He's the Lamb who was given, slain for our pardon. His promise is peace for those who believe. So come, though you have nothing, come. He is the offering. Come, see what your God has done. Christ is born. Christ is born. Christ is born for you. Christ is born. Christ is born. Christ is born for you.
I think one of the reasons that I love that song so much is it just completely speaks to the hope that is the Christmas season. It speaks to the hope that is embedded in being included. It speaks to the hope that is ushered in with an invitation, with an open hand, and with realizing that there may be space for you in this space. So Advent has 4 themes to it. This first week is the theme of hope, which is often my favorite to talk about. And so this week I was pondering and I was processing. And part of what I was processing was, how do you define hope? How do
You
you
asking?
define? Well, I mean, first of all, I'm just existentially saying, like, that's what I was pondering, but I am going to ask you. So I'm going to give you a second to think
Okay.
about it.
Thank you.
But so here's what, so like there's been a long running joke. Holly and I've known each other in dead ministry for 10 years now. And we've often joked that like I could publish a Christie's dictionary because I sometimes create my own definitions for words, or I make up words, and then we have a new definition for that. But I was trying to think about, like, how would I define hope? And so I made a list of some of my definitions. But before I share those with you, I also sought some wise counsel. I sent text messages starting this morning to 5 friends. 4 of them responded. So we had some really good conversation.
Yeah, who's the fifth?
Yeah, I won't call them out. They're probably traveling, and then they'll be like, oh, I missed this. But anyway, I want to share with you a couple of their responses and some of the exchange that we had. And then I'm going to ask you to, and then I'll share some of my thoughts about what is hope. So the first person that I texted was my very dear friend and 3rd member of our TCG teaching team, one of our leadership members, Sharita Thomas Tate. And I love the way that Sharita's mind works. I love the way that Sharita thinks about things and perspectives. And so I said, hey, how would you define hope? And after a moment, she responded back and said, holding on to a possibility. Holding on to a possibility. And I just love that visual, like this idea that hope is like a grasp, right? Hope is like a verb of not just an action that we do with our minds, but literally, when I think of holding on to a possibility, I think about like clinging to, right? Like grabbing a hold of, like, this is my lifeline. This is my rescue. This is what I'm going to hang on to, because this possibly may be the thing that changes things. This may possibly be what makes this situation better or different or improves it. And I just was so struck by the visual of that idea of holding on to something, that hope is to hold, and hope is to cling, and hope is this like action of grabbing onto something that could be this possibility. So I loved that definition. Another friend that I texted was Phil Snyder from Brentwood, our very good friend. And Phil, ever the teacher, ever the philosopher, started quoting all of these fantastic other thinkers for me, always challenges me in that way. And so, was sharing some thoughts and some perspectives. And one of the things that he said was, I'm going to read this out of his text. He said, this is part of why I love the nativity stories. The idea that people living under the crushing might of the Roman imperial rule somehow found a way to believe that God would bring liberation. Their feelings of hopelessness gave birth to hope. And I texted him back and I said, so good. Heart emoji, heart emoji. In a way, you could say that hope is a form of power, the power retained by those who choose to hang on to it, right? Who choose to grab a hold of it, like what Sharita was saying. And he texted back and shared another quote by saying, the power of the powerless set into motion, in contrast to all the powers that be, the subversive call to love and rising up from below among the people, right? This idea that hope is contagious, and that when we dare to hope, it is something that other people tend to go, you're clinging onto that. I'm going to cling onto that with you. And together, courage spreads, hope spreads, and we rise together, not just in isolation. And I think there's something really beautiful about that. So another thinker that I texted, who I'm blessed to do life with, is my friend Allie Henney, who used to be an intern at TCG once upon a time, and is now in Chicago doing amazing theology work. And so Allie and I had an interesting conversation, because initially Allie's response was, I would define it like faith, as something you can't see. And so I kind of pushed back a little. This is why I love my friends so much, and that we have these conversations a lot. But I said, okay, but in scripture, it specifically says, faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. So clearly they're 3 separate concepts. So how do we define hope? How is hope independent of faith? What does that look like to be different? And then Allie said this, there is an inherent anticipatory nature in hope. Anticipatory nature. Like I loved that idea, that anticipation. And when I think about anticipation, I think about Christmas, right? I think about little kids at Christmas time and the excitement and the anticipation of what's coming and what is in that box that's wrapped and pretty, or, what is going to happen at the end of this season. And just kind of that, I can't think about anticipation without thinking about energy. Right? There's just energy that's created when you feel like something's going to happen, when you feel like something's about to shift or change or something exciting is coming. There is an energy that is created in that space. And so as Allie and I kind of went back and forth over text, I said, so I feel like we could say that hope is an energy. It's an energy that builds and it develops and it creates in that space. So, then I texted John Hill, and John texted me back and said, hope is focused on the future. Hope is focused on the future. And I kind of followed that up with a really great conversation with my 19-year-old. And he answered the same way when I asked him, how would you define hope? He said, well, I think it's, looking forward, looking ahead. Mm-hmm. And there's an orientation to hope, right? We don't hope behind us, because what's done is done in that sense, right? You can't hope in retrospect. You can hope in the present, but our hope in the present is forward focused, right? When we have a hope, it's this clinging, it's this energy, it's this potential, it's this power of what could be. And there is something really beautiful about that forward nature of hope. So now I'm going to ask the two of you, how would you define hope?
I felt like those were very philosophical.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing my brain went to was a more practical definition. And I think that comes from where I work. So I work at Convoy of Hope. It's in the name. And a lot of the stories that we write talk about tangible hope and what that looks like for people who are in some way or another struggling in life. And oftentimes for them, and you could say the same for our friends on the streets, hope looks like our outreach van pulling up.
Hope looks like help.
Hope looks like a Convoy of Hope truck pulling up in a desolate village with no water. And you can see it in their eyes. And it's like it is focused on the future, but it's also focused on like wow, I have hope in this moment because of X, Y, and Z. And
I'm going to survive this moment to live into the future because of this help. Yeah.
And I think that extends. Like the tangible hope that they have extends into the future.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good. How about you, Helen?
I think the first thing that my brain jumped to, and I actually have a little tattoo that says "Dare to Hope" on my arm. For me, I think I focus on the feeling of hope. And for me, like, I think hope feels like those moments when it's like dark outside and it's rainy and it's stormy and it's cold and there's like a heaviness. And I feel like that's a very normal thing for winter, but it happens all year long. Like that heaviness that you're wearing, that you just like, it just like feels so consuming. And hope feels like that moment when the sun comes out and it's warm and it's bright. And I feel like so many times hope is not the solutions. It's not the things that fix the problems. It's just that little glimmer of something that gives you a chance to hold on to something. It's like the next breath or the next drink of water or the next, and it's just that little space that's just, it's that moment when you're like, I can't do this. And it's that next moment that says, but I can. Like, I don't know what it looks like. I don't know where this is coming from. I don't know what this feeling stems from, but I just know that like, I'm going to keep going, or I'm going to keep trying.
Yeah. And I think there's something really visual in that too, Hal. Like this idea that hope comes in waves, right? Like hope is seldom a one-time act, right? Like, yes, the convoy truck pulls in. Yes, the outreach truck rolls up. Like, yes, there is an act that may feel like hope, but as soon as that bottle of water is gone, or as soon as that hot hand grows cold, or as soon as those gloves get wet, or that food gets eaten, that feeling, the darkness, the worry, the anxiety, by human nature creeps back in, right? And so we have to anticipate, we have to look forward to, we have to, trust and cling on to this hope that another wave of hope is going to come, that there's going to be another breath that's going to push us to find our power, to keep rising, to keep fighting, to keep daring to hope. And I think that that's such an incredibly beautiful thing, because I think sometimes we treat faith in general, but I think we really treat some of these Christian concepts at Advent like they're these magical wands, right? Like I put up the Christmas tree, I hang the garland, I hang the twinkle lights, I watch the Hallmark movies, and like hope should just like ooze out of me from the end of Thanksgiving until the 1st of January. And that's just not always true, right? And that's not true all year long. I think a lot of times I talk to people who really struggle with like, I believe, I trust, but sometimes I struggle to hope. And this idea that sometimes I just need a fresh infusion of hope. I need a fresh reminder of something to remind me to keep looking forward, to keep looking ahead. Those are fantastic definitions. Let me throw out a couple of mine. So one of the things that I thought about was like faith talks about in scripture, right? That faith is the evidence of things not yet seen. It's believing without seeing, if that's faith. And I thought about if that's the case, and faith is very much this seeing without, or, believing without seeing, could we not argue that hope is the promise of things not yet felt? Like, I don't yet feel safety and security, but I hope for a roof over my head. I don't yet feel relief and joy at the reunification of my family, but I'm hoping that that day is going to come. And I don't yet feel satisfaction and hunger alleviation in my stomach all the time, but I am hoping for the day that I have food security and that I can provide an income for my family. Those kind of spaces that say, I don't feel something yet, but I am hoping for a feeling, like I am feeling my feelings forward. You know what I mean? That like I'm clinging to what that's going to feel like. And because of that, I have hope for what that's going to look like. So that was one definition that I jotted down, was the promise of things not yet felt. Here's another definition. And that is simply, I think hope is a question. Hope is a question. Hope is this like, what if, right? What if? What if this whole crazy Jesus thing is true? What if I trusted that person and let them in and built a friendship? And what if they didn't let me down? What if I actually deserved to be loved and to be cared for and to be treated with respect? What if I set the standard for myself higher than the cycles of my family in the past? What if I opened up about trauma and got help and therapy and I started to heal? And what would that look like? What if I began to use my talents and my gifts and to get involved and to make a difference in the world? What could become if only, right? And I think that is hope, like the courage to ask that question of what if, and to lean into the liminal space that is in that tension between asking the question and will I engage to find the answer? There's hope in that. There's beauty in that. Holly, you talked about darkness and kind of that visual. And I think we could build on that and say, hope is the light, right? Like no matter how dark the darkness, even the absolute teeniest, tiniest spark is still going to show, right? It may not illuminate the whole situation. It may not change the situation immediately. It may not light up the whole room, but it shows. And I think that light shows up. Hope shows up. Hope is visible when everything else maybe isn't visible. And I think there's something really powerful about that. It's a contrast, right? Like hope is the contrast in the darkness. I think the last one that I want to throw out is I also think that there is an element of hope is the willingness to look foolish. Because I want you to think about it, right? Like sometimes if I am standing in the gap between my what if and what actually becomes, right? Sometimes in that gap, my hope requires me to look forward and feel forward and trust forward and cling to things that for some people just don't make any sense, right? And some people are going to look at us and they're going to say, why don't you just give up? Why don't you walk away from that? Why don't you, close that chapter or whatever that looks like? But if you feel called to stand in a gap in a liminal space between something and something, and you feel called to breathe hope into the in between, I think we have to be prepared for people to go, you sure you want to do that? How long are you going to wait in that space, right? Like in a lot of ways, I think we do that on a pretty regular basis at TCG, right? Like we're going to stand in the gap in this city between all of the brokenness and the broken systems and the injustices that exist in this city. And we're going to stand in the gap between what this city could be. And we're going to hope for change. And we're going to hope for things to be different. We're going to hope for neighborhoods to look different and for leaders to think different. And we're going to hope for budgets to be set differently. And we're going to hope that things can be brought about in a different space. And in the meantime, I'm perfectly okay with people thinking that I'm crazy while I talk about the hope of what could be, right? Because there's a lot of people who would just say, why don't we not expend energy in what could be? And let's just be frustrated with what is. And I think there's something about hope that is audacious. It is wild enough to say what if. And if it's wild enough to say what if, it's got to be brave enough to hold the tension while we wait for that answer. And so all this year, we have been talking through the book of Psalms. So I challenged myself for Advent to try to stay in Psalms. I just want you to know that this is a bit of a preaching challenge for me, because obviously we tend to gravitate to the Gospels during Advent. But week 1, easy to do. Psalm 146. I'm going to read this to you. It's not very long, but I think it's all important in the course of this conversation. Psalm 146 says, "Praise the Lord. Let all that I am praise the Lord. I will praise the Lord as long as I live. I will sing praises to my God with my dying breaths." Now, does that not sound like hope? Does that not sound like I'm going to keep praising even as like life is draining from me? I'm going to keep trying to breathe praise and hope in that space. Verse 3 says this: "Don't put your confidence in powerful people. There is no help for you there. When they breathe their last, they return to the earth, and all of their plans die with them. But joyful are those who have the God of Israel as their helper, whose hope is in the Lord. He made heaven and earth, the sea, and everything in them. God keeps promises forever. God gives justice to the oppressed and food to the hungry. God lifts and frees the prisoners. God opens the eyes of the blind. The Lord lifts up those who are weighed down. The Lord loves the godly. The Lord protects the foreigners among us. God cares for the widows and the orphans, and he frustrates the plans of the wicked. God will reign forever. God will be God, O Jerusalem, throughout the generations, because hope endures. I think hope is also something that can be passed down, because one of the things about Advent is its generational nature, right? The hope that David's writing about, the psalmist is writing about, this actually wasn't written by David, but another poet. But Old Testament prophets and kings had this hope that there would be a Messiah, that there would be a savior, there would be a king that would be sent. And they had a lot of different variations into what they thought that would mean. But here's the thing: they had to teach the next generation how to keep holding on to that hope. Hope became a torch that was passed down from leader to leader, from parents to child, from caregiver to caregivee. Like, it was this generational gift that had to be tended. It had to be loved. I'm sure it got harder and heavier as the generations went on. Why are we still foolishly standing in the gap, hoping for something that hasn't come for hundreds of years? Like, is this really a thing? Is this not just a myth? And as they watched as their culture and their society and their people were persecuted and colonized, and people were murdered and overtaxed, and they're in this space, yet they dared to hope. Yet they dared to ask, what if God keeps his promises? What would that look like? And I love the way that Psalm 146 says, joyful are those who have the God of Israel as their helper, whose hope is in the Lord. Because there is something about where we ground our hope that matters, right? Like, if you put your hope in structures and systems, they're going to let you down every time. If you put your hope in anything that is human made, it's going to break. It's going to fade out at some point. The only thing that truly endures, that we can keep hope in, that's regenerative, is God. God's presence that hasn't changed, that doesn't change, that won't change, that endures all things, like we talked about last week. You know, you read the end of Psalm 146, and it is like the heart of God is on display, right? That God made everything. God cares about nature. The environment is important to him, and protecting nature is critical to God's heart. God has a heart for justice and hopes for justice, hopes to see created people be instruments of justice, hopes to see us feed the hungry, hopes to see us free the prisoners, hopes to see us open the eyes of the blind. God hopes to see us move in response to his call to ground our hope in him. I think that's the beautiful thing about this Advent theme, is this idea that when we hope in God, we also become instruments of making these things a reality in the world, because we become instruments of God. We become tools that get used to build relationships, to set tables, to include people. And to me, that is what Christmas reminds us of. That's what the nativity story is all about. That's what Advent celebrates, is this idea that God loves us as a potential, right? Mm-hmm. God didn't send Jesus because of how good we were. God didn't send Jesus inherently because of how bad we were. God sent Jesus to cultivate the potential of what could be, to challenge systems and structures that had become really entrenched, to shift the power dynamic. Jesus came down to bring hope, to bring love, to bring peace, to bring joy. And all of those things are embedded in the themes of Christmas. So we were kind of tossing around ways to end service tonight, and we thought it would be fun to take a song we've done many times at TCG, a song that many of you probably know. It's not necessarily a Christmas song, but I mean, it kind of is, I guess. But we're going to change the lyrics of it just a little bit, because it's actually a song that talks about how love came down. But for tonight's message, and for this week's theme of hope, we're going to talk about how hope came down.
It is overwhelmed, and I cannot hear your voice, or hold on to what is true, though I cannot see. If the storms of life they come, and the road ahead gets steep, I will lift these hands in faith, I will believe. I'll remind myself of all When my heart is filled with hope, and every promise comes my way. When I feel your hands of grace rest upon me. Staying desperate for you, God. Staying humbled at your feet. I will lift these hands in praise. I will believe. I'll remind myself of all that you've done, and the life I have because of your Son. Hope came down and rescued me. Hope came down and set me free. I am yours. I am forever yours. Mountain high and valley low, I sing out, remind my soul, I am yours, I am forever yours. I am yours, I am yours, all my days, Jesus, I am yours, I am yours, I am yours, all my days, Jesus, I am yours. Hope came down and rescued me. Hope came down and set me free. I am yours. I am forever yours. Mountain high and valley low, I sing out, remind my soul, I am yours. I am forever yours.
You know, we talk so much about how, which is scriptural, you know, that God is love, that Jesus is love. But I think changing those lyrics just reminds us of such an important truth, because Jesus was the hope, right? Jesus was the hope that they had been clinging to. Jesus was the shift in the power dynamic. Jesus was the long awaited future peace that kept everyone moving forward. And in the coming of Jesus and in the leaving of Jesus, there is a call to action for us as people who claim to follow the teachings of Jesus and the ways of Jesus, that we have hope because he came, because he loved, because he showed us and he raised the bar. But also, I think there's something really beautiful about this idea that we also hope because we know that Jesus isn't done, and that there is still so much hope that needs to be infused, love that needs to be shown, mercy and grace that needs to be extended, and tables that need to be opened up and inclusive. So welcome to Advent season. We are excited to continue these conversations and unpackaging them with you. Background noise and all cute toddlers and dogs and all in this virtual season for us, because this is how we set tables. It is oftentimes just very authentic and not at all scripted and rehearsed, but just from our heart to yours. And so we hope and we pray that these next few weeks are just a blessing and a challenge to you in a season that can both be really beautiful and really burdensome and really hard. I want you to know that you're not alone. And I hope tonight reminds you that there are pieces to cling to. And I hope that it helps to rekindle hope in your circumstances, no matter what they are. So We have a couple of announcements for tonight before we end our service. The first one I'm super excited about. I'm going to attempt to show this to you. We'll see how well it works. So because we are back into a very virtual space, one of the things that we recognize is when we're not all together, communication is definitely harder. And sometimes it gets harder to keep track of all the things and, what were the top 3 this week? Where do I find the top 3? What are the code reds at the OC? Where do I find those? Where's the link to the Amazon wish list? All of those kind of things. And so we spent some time the last couple of weeks thinking, let's reimagine what a TCG app might be able to look like to just help keep us a little bit better connected in this season. So I'm super excited to tell you that if you are an Apple user, the TCG app is live and ready. I discovered this afternoon that the Android app is for some reason gotten hung up. So it should be out in the next couple of days, but nonetheless, it will look the same on both. So I'm just going to show it to you really quickly. So if you look on my phone with all of my notifications, this is what it's going to look like. So it looks like our little logo, which if we click on is going to bring up our app. And so you will be able to go to the website. It will give you the Zoom link info. Typically during our regular meeting seasons, we do dinner together at 5, and that's our version of communion together every week at TCG. Right now we're doing that in a digital space at 5 o'clock with Zoom. If anyone wants to jump in and just eat dinner and hang out and talk and fellowship. Here is going to show you all of our past services, including this one that will show up in just a few minutes. So you'll be able to watch. You'll also be able to watch live in the app. You can see top 3 for that week, which is pretty cool because not only can you see them, but as it shows you what they are, for example, top 1 says, hey, we really need volunteers at the family shelter. If you want to volunteer at the family shelter, get a hold of Holly, and then you click that little button and you can email Holly straight from the app, which will be nice. So those are there. We've also got our calendar. We've got, this is kind of fun, a TCG crew chat, which is a lot like our own little social media network inside of our app where you can post some updates or, hey, I'm just having a rough day. I wanted to let somebody know. People can comment. They can heart it a lot like a Facebook post. Without all the Facebook drama, hopefully. And so you can share pictures, you can share videos in here, which is really fun. There's also information on all the different ways to get involved and volunteer at TCG. There is information about the cooperative youth group, all the things that you might need, all of our links, including Spotify, so that you can follow along with some of the songs that we do here on virtual service. So if you're an Apple user, you can download it tonight. If you're an Android user, stay tuned. We'll announce that as soon as it's live. But hopefully this will be a tool that will make things just a little bit easier to get connected. As I mentioned, Holly is desperately in need of volunteers at the family shelter. Do you want to talk about that for just a second?
Yeah. We are consistently seeing that we're going to be probably at capacity or close to capacity every night. And so we have several different needs throughout the winter. We have 2 different volunteer positions that we still have needs for. The biggest need is overnight volunteers. And so it is a shift that's from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. every morning. It's a shift that's primarily meant to just be awake in case anyone needs anything. It's technically called the fire watch. We need to have someone awake in order to be a shelter to kind of keep an eye on things. We schedule 2 people for those, so you get half a night's sleep. So you get to kind of operate on a shorter schedule for that. And then just help families get out the door in the morning after they have breakfast. So we have a huge need for that most nights of the week right now. We also have a first shift that honestly, the greater need is just people who love kids and want to come help love on kiddos, play games with them, help do some guided activities. We're finding that there's a lot of chaos in that room, understandably. And so parents are able to focus more on the things like getting laundry done, helping make a plan for the next day, connecting with our staff to figure out resources that they need to be accessing if kiddos are busy and entertained. And so just a chance to love on kiddos is a really beautiful thing. And then we have meals every night. I know we have a lot of gaps in December already. So if you like to cook or you like to order food for places, we're running about 20 individuals for families a night and then a few volunteers. lots of gaps for that. We have a meal train page on our website that you can access.
You can find
or
it on the
our
app.
And then we have an ongoing Amazon wish list, and some of our greatest needs for that is just ongoing snacks and some different hygiene items and like toys for the kids and things like that. So yeah, so definitely reach out if you have any interest in just even asking questions and learning about if this is something you have any ability to do. If it's once a month, once a week, once every other week, like whatever that looks like, we'll definitely use the help. So, or take the help.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the third thing for our top 3 this week is Christmas, and how to be a part of Christmas at TCG in terms of gifts. So we have 2 different things that we're collecting for this year. So for street outreach, the outreach center and our overnight shelters, cold weather shelters around town, we have a pretty aggressive goal of trying to collect 750 pairs of thermal underwear. And so those are a incredibly life-saving layer of extra warmth and protection for our individuals that are the most hyper vulnerable. So those people that are genuinely sleeping outdoors or can't access shelter, because shelters, when they're open, have been almost full to capacity every single night. And so we have a critical shortage of shelter spaces in this city. But these thermals can literally help save lives, especially as we get into the really cold months of January and February. So 750 of them is a big goal, but we hear a rumor that Bass Pro is having a 50% off sale this week. So that may be something, if you're local, you want to shop and try to pick some of those up. You can drop those off in our donation bins at Cosmic Fish or at Pagination, or bring them by the Outreach Center. You can also order them straight off of our Amazon wish list. And then they come straight to my front porch, which is stacking up, and I love it. And I'm excited about that. So that's one way that you can help with Christmas. The other piece of Christmas at TCG is helping with our kiddos and our families. And so those are families that we serve in 3 different ways: family shelter, our family connection families that we're supervising visits for, and our aftercare families, which are families that have already gone through family connection and have reunified. So what we're doing this year for them is Walmart gift cards. And so that way parents are able to go do some shopping and get gifts for kids. And so we are currently looking for 2 different sets of Walmart gift cards. We need about 15 gift cards at the $50 level, and we need about 15 gift cards at the $100 level, because we have some families that have multiple kiddos. And so if you are interested in helping with that and want to purchase a gift card or 2, you can do those and drop those off at the Outreach Center, or you can mail those to TCG, which is 4341 West Chestnut Expressway, Springfield, Missouri, 65802. So that would help immensely to help us make a really special Christmas for people that we're loving on. So, all right, those are our top 3. Thank you guys so much for joining us for virtual service and the start of Advent and kickoff of all the things. I hope it's a wonderful week. I hope you get to enjoy some beautiful weather that's coming this week. So there's something to hope in. We have like sunshine coming for a few days before it gets cold again. So yeah, Merry Christmas. First time I've said that this year. So, all right. Bye, guys.